I don't think at any point a woman has had less than two jobs. She kind of cares for herself, cares for the home, but then also has to care for her husband. And then you add in kids. So, like, let's just assume any woman who's coupled up is working two jobs. Add in children, you're talking three jobs, and that's before you look for work outside of the house. My running theory is women were just as good hunters as men, but if they left their baby back at the cave with a caveman, the odds of them coming home after a successful hunt and finding their child intact was pretty minimal. Whereas if they stayed home with the kid and they let the men go out and hunt the woolly mammoth, they got woolly mammoth meat and their child in one piece. My running theory is women were actually better hunters, but they were more interested in the survival of their genetic line. It takes you 9 days to hunt a woolly mammoth. It takes me 9 months to grow one of these kids. For division of labor, we're going to stay home. You guys go hunt. Yeah, no, big strong man. But also throughout history, there have always been extra jobs put on women, from family members lodging with them and either paying money or returning, in labor for their stay. But that put extra work on a woman. That was extra laundry, that was extra food, that was extra everything. A lot of women also, would become temporary holiday help up at the big house. So they would leave their family from Christmas to go serve at the big house for, a few pennies. But if you have a bad farming year, her winter wages would see you through the winter, which was critical. Local shops have always relied upon women to stock certain products, like the town store would sell eggs. The eggs would come from multiple farms, women were rounding them up and bringing them into town. Kids were in school, husbands were in the field. It was on the woman to bring in and transport. They collected the honey, they made the jams, they made the other stuff. Like the fisherman fished, but then the fishmonger's wife, she sat around beheading all the fish all day. That was her job. Plus she ran the house, plus she had the kids, plus she had whatever. So a woman's career was also secondary to her husband's very often, but uncredited. He was the butcher, but she was somehow not involved. It was his bakery, and yet who was working with all the customers. In Victorian and Edwardian times, people got really industrious, and they would pick strawberries or something and send them into town, because the farms had strawberries but couldn't afford them. It was a luxury crop. But if you got them on a train and you got them to London, it would sell for 10 times what you could make for a strawberry in your local farm village. You'll never guess who got put in charge of that hobby kind of farming. The man ran the farm, the woman was in charge of grow daisies or daffodils or strawberries or something, like a cash crop that you could send into London or New York, and you would make immense amounts of money. Women have also throughout history brewed, made wine, made mead, brought in laundry, done darning for the locals. Also, they tended to fall into herbal remedies kind of thing, and also being a midwife. There are 1,000 more examples, but very infrequently do you find women throughout history who don't have at least two jobs, whether society is giving them credit for those two jobs or not. It's only around 200 years ago, it was really considered a luxury to have a dainty wife, with the fainting couch and the vapors, and took to her bed for days because he said something wrong. He used the fish fork on the salad. I must recline myself. Because you were now so rich that you could afford to have a useless wife, because they used to run the manor, they used to run everything. And now we got to a point that you had enough technology and you had enough help and you had enough money that your wife could be absolutely useless, and that became a brag. And that's when, the tiny little waists and the dainty wives and the fainting became really big. I'm so rich, I can afford to have a wife who does nothing. But the illusion of the 1950s, yes, we had better technology, we had better ovens, we had better refrigerators, vacuums actually worked, washing machines actually worked, modern conveniences were great, but we still had, Help, which in the story of the 1950s we don't really include in the story, but the movie The Help kind of gives you the idea. That perfectly run home is because it takes two women to run a perfectly made home. But uncredited, because you get credit for all those little finger sandwiches at bridge night. Women are just used to doing more labor uncredited, but you would now have to take women who have been in the career field, who are used to a career job and possibly home work, and convince them to try to do traditional homework. If you've ever seen those trad wives, except for the few on YouTube who completely fake how not exhausting that stuff is, I will tell you, after a day of canning, I'm done. If I had to raise 12 kids and spend the day canning tomatoes, absolutely not. If you're going to force us back into the homes, we're going to do one job and one job only. if you're looking for the 1950s kind of traditional housewife, you're going to have to bring home Quaaludes. Like, that's the only way it's going to happen. Mommy's Little Helpers and Mommy's Little Sleeping Pills are the only way we're going to roll back to those roles. You also have to convince an entire generation of women to not work, which there's never been a time in society when we haven't worked. It hasn't been credited, but we've been working the whole time. It's only now we get as much credit as men for doing the jobs. Well, almost. But I mean, look at the number of inventions that are now properly credited to women. Multiply that throughout history. How many family businesses, how many cottage industries were almost solely because women did it, and then the husbands were like, yes, of course, I make clotted cream for the ladies. Like, there's no way you're making petit fours, sir. No, none. But even the 1950s wasn't the 1950s. What you see in the TV shows or, like the ads for the modern kitchen, we still have people alive from the 1950s who will tell you it was not like that. Outside of an Electrolux home show set, it didn't look like that at all. Just look at the number of kids who were born in the 1950s who go looking for their parents. They were doing things back then, they just hid it, and nobody really talked about it. Or you went to go live with an aunt in the big city. But yeah, you know what? Roll it back to the 1950s. You're gonna have so many regrets when you do. What I find funny is, like, everybody watches Mad Men and is like, yeah, men get to be in the office and drink all day and screw the secretaries. You really don't think any of the wives were home playing with the pool boy? Both groups can cheat. I don't know why you think they wouldn't. Like, okay, cool. The guys in the office could cheat. The women were home all day with the kids in daycare and an endless supply of repairmen coming in and out. There's a reason there's a very popular storyline in Corn about repairmen, pizza boys, pool boys. Oh, we'll sit home while you go work all day. We'll be perfect little wives. Pay no attention to your kids looking exactly like the postman and not you.